Welcome back. This is Daybreak, and thank you for staying with us. The hashtag on X is Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. We will sample your feedback in the course of this broadcast. Of course, some coming in, and we will be putting that to my two guests here in studio. Dr. Chris Galgalo is an educationist and here with us. Thanks for your time, Daktari. And Nyambura Thiong'o was with us earlier, and thank you as well. She is the Regional Education Learning Initiative Kenya Country Coordinator. Thanks for your time, lady and gentlemen. Still with you, Dr. Galgalo, and this was the question on the stakeholders who are still concerned, and we are yet to find, because this seems to be a perpetual problem of why there is this delay in the disbursement of the money. According to the Kenya Union of Post-Primary Education Teachers Secretary General Akelo Misori, he said the promises by the ministry are all lies, and it's unfortunate that school managers have been punished to run schools without money. He said we shall not allow teachers to report to schools to manage stress levels again. Lawmakers must appropriate sufficient funds to run public schools and hire new teachers. Again, we talked about the delay. This is certainly having also, isn't it, sort of a psychological warfare on the teachers who have to find ways of how to manage their schools. I mean, it's more or less a double-edged sword of it also having an impact on how the teachers are handling the learners.
And actually, the money of the school or the school financial management, actually there are three people who are managing the school funds. One is the BOM together with the principals. And then the second one, we have also the auditors who are really managing how this money is used. And the third one is the parents who are disbursing or giving out this money. Yeah. But the problem is when we talk about delay in disbursement of from the Ministry of Education or whatever it is, there is certain money which you have not mentioned about.
Which is?
What is the money that has been received from parents? What does this money used for? How is it being managed? Because it is the parents who are also paying hefty amount of money for their children. So why are we not questioning about also the parents? How many principals have received this money? And what amount? And what percentage of the total amount they have received? Then what is the quota of the Ministry of Education? How much money is being received? So when you put all these things, and there are also some money which comes from the donors, the well-wishers, it comes. And then how do we account for all this money? We are only focusing on the government side. Yeah. But the problem is not only the government side. Also the problems are also the school, where the management could have siphoned the money. I don't know. But the issue is, how are we transparently managing this money? So we are always, the Kuppet is saying, or is it Kuppet? Yeah, Kuppet is saying, this is a mishandling. This is a campaign tool. I'm sorry to say. This is a campaign tool for them because they wanted to be relevant to the teachers' interests and principles so that they will be year in, year out, they are in the position. But to me, as far as I'm concerned, did they find out to the school, particularly where this money goes? And they are the members of the BOM, by the way. And how are they managing this money? They shouldn't have just mentioned about the Ministry of Education, the Ministry. Of course, the challenges are also there. Okay. The challenges are there, but it is now, have they even consulted the Ministry of Education, because they are rightfully accessible to the Ministry of Education, per se.
Okay. And yeah. I want to come to Nyambura on that question, because accountability here is key. I mean, the government is not the only entity here which is the punching bag when it comes to accountability. Schools also have to be. For example, Honorable Beatrice Elachi is watching this broadcast. She's the MP, Dagoretti North constituency, and one of the constituencies with the most public schools. And she says, ask why parents are being asked to pay, for example, photocopying papers, each child to bring 2 reams and what is the school fees that parents are paying for? I mean, what's the point of them paying school fees? Imagine, she says, a school with more than 1,000 students, how many reams of papers that could be in terms of spending the money and bringing the papers required. Accountability should also be on the front, at the doorstep of schools, is it, and the managers of these respective schools?
Yes, Ayub, and I think, as Dr. said it very well, within the schools, I think for me the question is always what also structures are available within the schools for parents to be able to also question, for example, management of the money that comes in the school. And sometimes we find that parents might want to understand what is happening, but then they are blocked. And I think that's a big issue within the schools that we have. Again, goes back to the management of our schools and who is managing them. And are there other powers that really are behind our school managers? Because I do think the power of the parents is very key. And I think our parents actually should be, they're the biggest stakeholder of education, actually, because that's where we have our children. And because of that, then the parents should actually be able to go to any school, the schools where their children are attending, and they should be able to question some of the things that are happening within the school. And some of these funds that are being charged by schools, and as Madam Beatrice Elachi says, I think as much as we do not want to admit that schools are asking, or managers are asking parents to contribute, they're actually asking them, despite the Basic Education Act being very clear that we shouldn't have any school charging any parent. But the question again goes back to, so if then the government doesn't release the capitation funds or the funds that they should release to the schools on time, how do those schools manage what they should be doing? How do they provide for the learners, and how will they also make sure that learning continues? And yet, remember, the government has also said that when schools open, we do not expect to see anyone at home. And you know, the local administration has even been charged with sometimes even going to the households where kids have not gone to school. So I think there's a big question around also the structures that are available within the school to be able to manage these schools, and to be able to also provide that platform for parents to honestly and realistically come and say, this is what I think, and question some of the processes. But I think those things sometimes are not in all the schools, and I think there's also a lot to learn maybe from some schools that are doing it, because there are schools that are doing it. There are schools where the parents actually question what the school management is doing. But then again, some of the parents fear, and I think that's where we also need to come straight and be clear on why is it that some schools are actually doing it and providing those platforms and structures, yet some of the schools are not doing it.
Yes, Dr. you have...
Actually, policies are made by the government, and nobody is following that policy they have made. For instance, in the school management, we have county education officers, we have sub-county directors of education, we have TSC directors in those BOM, and so when the parents or the principals are charging the parents those hefty amount of money or stationaries and what have you, the Ministry of Education is represented in the BOM. And so, who do we, when they say policy should, there's no money solicited from the parent outside the school fees, then what are we saying? Because the person who is representing them is already there on the board. So, if policies are being made, strictly it should be followed. And then monitoring. We lack the monitoring of these things. So, when we don't monitor and audit the school financial setup, then what are we telling each other? There's nothing that we are telling each other, because the policies we make are not implemented effectively as required or as desired. So I think there is a loophole somewhere that we are not taking our work seriously, because what Honorable Elachi has said is true. Probably because not all over the schools, in all the schools in this country, but in a satellite of schools that can manage all these kinds of funny things is visible, because she had already seen practically. But then, what is the ministry doing? Ministry of Education doing to that effect? What is TSC doing, who is also monitoring their own staff as such? So I think, as she said, Yambura said, is parents are fear. fearful of what action is being taken within the school management, because you will be targeted the next time, and the BOM, who is represented also by PTA, Parent Teachers Association representative in that board. So they are afraid to raise up the issues or to raise an alarm for that matter. So I think there is a loophole. Somebody somewhere is not monitoring the work. They are just in the office, they said everything is well. And it's something, all is not well, as from the ground I have also encountered.
Yeah. But then this is obviously the unequal resourcing that we talked about, and then the existing already gap in terms of the socio-economic status of Kenyans. And education is supposed to be a leveler, but certainly the social divide is evident. And this then is an accountability question, Nyambura, coming to you, on how schools should equally account for it. Then how can the ministry follow up on this with regards to the established names, for example, which was to take the data of students that was supposed to have the admission taken and the details of their parents, so that it's onboarded and there can be proper monitoring mechanism? I mean, how can this be put into effect in terms of bringing these schools that are overcharging parents to the accountability bracket?
Ayub, to be honest, I don't know whether there is actually a direct answer to that, because the structures are there. But the monitoring and implementation of this is what is lacking. But then I think there's a deeper issue into why. If, for example, we looked at our schools and said that the funds they are getting is, say, adequate to manage a school, would we still have issues of parents being asked to, contribute to schools or to money in schools for whatever reason that the school wants? So I do think that there is an element of our lack of monitoring the implementation. We develop very good policies that really actually state what we should do and what we should not do. We have implementation plans that are in existence, but then what happens to the monitoring of those implementation plans that we develop? And I think that even as we think about the role that the Ministry of Education is providing and the role that all the stakeholders probably take and their responsibilities, I think for me there is also a need to take back this to the public and the community, because the community and the public are the people who say what we need. We are the same people who elect the people, for example, our MPs. Yeah. And I guess the question is, what role does the public have? You and I, what role do we have? Because our children need these schools. We don't have any other schools to take them to. So we will have to utilize the schools that are in this country. And whenever I see parents deciding on where they want to take their children, I always ask myself whether it's actually their choice to take their child to that school. And if they were provided with everything that the Ministry of Education or the Ministry of Education in this case says, then would they still make that choice perhaps to even take their child to a particular school over another one? So I think there is an element of lack of monitoring of the work of what is happening, and also a lack of learning from what is already happening. Because if consistently we are discussing an issue of parents being, accountable or being able to go to schools, there are some schools and there are some people already doing this. Why are we not learning from what is working and trying to also implement this across the board? But also to talk about also the kind of role that parents play within our schools. I think it's also important to realize that as much as they are playing a critical role in educating their children, that they also have a critical role to provide for them. So there's also a need for the balance in a way that we are also not making now parents become, like prefects, so to speak. But how do we also balance that they're able to monitor, that we make it effective and efficient, but also allow them to continue providing for their children in other areas of their life.
Dr. then how do we center stage this conversation? We talked about the delay and the bureaucracies involved there, in the need for accountability, and also on the part of schools that overcharge parents, as also highlighted by one of the lawmakers whose constituency houses more public schools, and to an extent that you have more than 1,000 learners who are told to bring money in cash either, or even buy reams of papers that's beyond the school fees structure and the tuition fees that they ought to be paying. So how do we then center stage this conversation? Because its continuity that then means that the crisis continues to unfold, and the people who are edged out or elbowed out of this conversation are people who depend on schools, and to be specific, public schools, who see them as engines of social mobility. But a continuity in the current status quo then means that the digital and the fundamental divide in terms of our society continues in the context of education.
One is even in the former speech by the Cabinet Secretary, Honorable Ezekiel Machogu, said there is a constraint in funding of education in this country. He stipulated that one in a meeting at the Kenya Institute of Special Education when there was a Nairobi people, youth meeting there. Mm-hmm. But from my own opinion, actually every holiday, the government is doing a kind of a postmortem or an evaluation when they have head teachers or principals meeting in Mombasa or wherever they are. And that is the time when KNUT will also say their part. Principal, KSHAP and KEPSHA people are also saying their part. KNUT, KUPPET, and other stakeholders. Kenya National Education, what do you call it? Kenya National Examination Council. Yeah. The curriculum people, they will all say all their issues and what have you. And from those presentations, you can learn a lot. And they said, where is the gap? And then where is that gap is when you all address those gaps to overcome those challenges. Secondly, the government has auditors. They have auditors.
But how as you make the audit point, how then is it possible if stakeholders can meet in Mombasa, which has been, now it's becoming more or less a tradition, to identify a problem? I mean, we are talking about people who are technocrats, who have been principals, who have been teachers, who know how the education system works in this country. And this happens, yes, but why is it that then we are failing to deliver an answer on this? Because if you look at the stakeholders you have mentioned, for example, KEPSHA, through its national chairperson, Johnson Zioka, said, we have been promised that money would be sent and we have been waiting. We needed the money to alleviate pressure on our head teachers. KUPPET said that the promises by the ministry are all lies. It's unfortunate that school managers have been punished to run schools without money. NAT says that we cannot continue like this. This is having a psychological effect on teachers, and that there is only one option, and that's to close schools. And this is because school heads cannot generate food to give learners. This is a big crisis that we must bite the bullet and make the right decisions. Despite the pompous meeting in Mombasa, still the problem hasn't gone away. They are still concerned. These are the stakeholders that have cited.
Where is the problem? The problem is now then the Ministry of Education, who is not doing their mandate. It's not the Ministry of Education who is not doing their mandate. Because if KUPPET and KNUT and other stakeholders are mentioning where the problem is, and the teachers are facing these challenges, then why don't they come together and address this issue? Otherwise, before the school closes, it is having a setback on our education system as a whole. It is just like this education reform. People went to the ground and collected views from the people. And the views of the people are not represented on their final draft. I, for one, I presented my case also. So what the people are doing is, I don't know whether it is a formal way of addressing the issue, but they are not taking it seriously. Where is the problem? And then they should see also through the parliament. If that is the case, then has this money been released from the from Treasury to the schools? And why is there a challenge? There is another channel where you can address those problems through Parliamentary Committee of Education. And then they can sanction the Ministry of Education why this money had not been released. And that is the procedure, actually. So when KUPPET, and whose representative also in Parliament, the KUPPET, and Mlemba is the chairperson, And he's one of them who is complaining. I am shocked because they are in parliament who can sanction the Ministry of Education and such. Why is this money delayed? And then there is another body which can also sanction. Why is this money not released through the audit and what have you? Why is this money delayed? And why does it delay? Or why does it not be disbursed promptly, for that matter? So I think the problem is the buck stops to the Ministry of Education, because that is the source of where we get our money for the schools.
Okay.
On the other side is also the parent. The parents should rightfully ask for that money disbursement, because they are also members of the school management. Why is that money not coming forthfully? You know? And this is where we have a dilemma in the education system. And unless we bite the bullet, we cannot reach anywhere.
That's what Nat says, yes. You had a point on the audit query. Yes.
Yes. That is it. So I think we are not doing our work as expected of us, because everybody is blaming the other, everybody is blaming the other. We cannot reach anywhere. Those people who blame each other, why don't they come together and say, where is the problem? They have the right and they can access, not like Galgalo who cannot access the minister for that matter. But if it's Kuppet and Kenyuti, when they come and have a courtesy call on the minister,
yes,
there is a danger somewhere. And alarm bell is rung. So they will open the way for them other than Galgalo, you know? So I think it is a high time we come together and solve this problem amicably once and for all. If it is about the school stationery, parents are overcharging and what have you, what is the role of the Ministry of Education? And they are the ones who came up with a policy to be implemented. You know, the whole problem, let me be frank, Ayub. We have several meetings, so and so on has gone for a meeting, for a meeting, for a meeting. And then I was asking even myself, when will this decision made in the meeting to be implemented? Because all the time they are in a meeting, so and so on. The policymakers are always in a meeting. And that is where the problem is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ayub, allow me to make a comment on that. I also think that the conferences and the meetings that people attend are just avenues for discussions. But then the question is what happens? I mean, all these meetings, conferences are supposed to provide us with an avenue where we all meet as stakeholders, and at least we are discussing a common issue. So then the question is, from all these conferences and meetings that we attend, what happens? Where are the actions from all these meetings? Do we have some sort of actions that we take from all these meetings? And I do agree that there is a need for us to also see these conferences and meetings that we attend graciously as avenues for us to also understand what is happening. Because, Ayub, I can tell you from where I work that the members of Rally Africa in this country work across the whole country, including areas like Marsabit. And the stories are actually real humans. The data that we are collecting is real humans. People who are suffering because they don't have access to education. People who actually education is their only way out of poverty and their only way to actually lift their households and their communities. So again, as Dr. is saying, we must take responsibility and we must stop treating education as if it is just something that we can throw everywhere, because it's important for us to remember that there are actual people involved. There are actual people who have to think about, should I have a meal or should I actually save this money so that it can go to educating my children? Yeah. So I think education now, and I think as we also think about the reforms and what is happening, there's a lot of goodwill, I believe. But then again, we all have to take our responsibilities and make this a national issue, which we've already started doing by all the dialogues that we are having.
Yes.
But it's critical that it becomes something that we are not just throwing everywhere, but we actually make it a priority to discuss the real issues that are affecting our parents and our children.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Daktari, talking about the audit that you have cited, and that is in relation to the underfunding that was cited by the Education CS Ezekiel Machogu in that speech, which I'll be coming to shortly, because you also talked about the context of private school versus public schools, private schools versus public schools in the context of Nairobi County. But how will such an audit then, as mentioned by as mentioned by you in your earlier submission, then yield the required results? Is that the pathway to the arresting of the problems that we're experiencing at the moment, and they seem to be running away?
Thank you, Ayub. One thing, it's good to be honest. I don't trust auditors. Some auditors. Why? Most of them have been compromised. They don't tell you the truth about where there is hiccup in the school financial management. They won't tell you. Once they come in goodwill, at the end of the day, they are compromised because they are not telling the truth about the financial management of those institutions. And several times, I have been a BOM member for 2 terms. That is 3 years, 3 years, 6 years. And what I have seen on those grounds is really alarming. Because if auditors sanction that this money is lost, then those principals will be sacked immediately because that money has been misused. Why? And normally they provide a loophole whereby that copy of the school audit is transacted to the Ministry of Education headquarters for further interrogation. And it does not stop at the school level. After that, it goes to the county. From county, it goes to the Ministry of Education headquarters for it to access and see and give advice. Can you explain why this and that has not been catered for appropriately as policy demands? So the issue is some of them might come up with a good record, good assessment, good audit, and what have you. But at the end of the day, who is going to take action as what they have said? And people have not. So they said, why should I be victimized? For the apparent reason that whatever I recommend, and nobody is taking action against that person, then you will become a victim of now circumstances at the end of the day. So they withdraw those kind of strict assessment about the school audit or school management, financial management as such. So I think the fear is also coming from those auditors themselves. And some of them have been compromised, some of them tell the reality, and then the buck stops with the principles of the school management. So if the board really show transparency and the principals has to answer to those requirements of the auditory inquiries as such. So the auditors, some of them might have done a good job, but the rest, I doubt some of them, because it is two-way traffic.
Yeah.
If I audit perfectly, then tomorrow nobody is taking action, then I will be victimized, or I will be transferred, or I will be even demoted as such. A good example, one time, I don't want to disclose here, and somebody, I consulted a school where my village is, and then we came with the Ministry of Education from headquarters. I alerted them that there is school management in this, mismanagement in this school. So when the Ministry of Education official came to Marsabit, and then they found they are going to that school with the auditors of within Marsabit County. And then he is the one now who called the principal that I am with those people, just get prepared, put your things in order, we are coming. What does that one tell you? Meaning that I'm making you to get prepared, make your things correctly and what have you, for the purpose of paperwork. You know, why should we tell the principal? Because he expects some kickbacks, probably.
Okay.
That is the thing.
Well, coming to Nyambura, this is the speech by the Education CS Ezekiel Machogu, 28th of March, during the Nairobi Education Dialogue held at the Kenya Institute of Special Education. And he cites on page number 8, and this way it's most concerning and pressing, that public schools constitute only 31% of schools in Nairobi, with the other 69% being private ones. He said, While this is commendable in complementing government efforts, it threatens accessibility, inclusivity, affordability, and the quality of education. This is more so when government continues to provide capitation to all students in public schools and implement other countrywide programs that promote inclusivity of education. We talked about capitation, which was not rightly on time, as his PS earlier communicated, saying that 25 billion was the amount of money that was released. Yeah, 25%, he said. In the next 10 days, we should have released all the resources. We talked about the opportunity gap. And now, this seems to be a crisis in Nairobi itself, is it? I mean, for those whose only source of hope is school, across, especially in Nairobi, where the urban poor appears to be growing at an exponential rate, this is a cause for worry, is it?
Yes, absolutely, Ayub. And I think that is actually what is happening, that more learners in Nairobi are attending private schools. But what that really tells us is that 69% of our children are not benefiting from government capitation.
Yeah.
It means the free primary education policy and free day secondary education, that our learners are actually not benefiting from it, which is a cause for a lot of worry. Because as you rightly said it, that especially in our urban informal settlements, we have almost maybe 6 out of 10 children attending these low-cost private schools. And remember, there's a whole debate around the existence of low-cost private schools, which are probably misconceptualized with the APBET schools. And the question has always been in terms of the standards that have been provided by the Ministry of Education for registration, and these schools cannot meet these standards. But then again, the question is, are there public schools where these learners can go to? The answer is no. So in areas like Kibera, you find maybe how many public schools? 2. And then the question is, if all these learners in this area are going to attend these public schools, that is not possible. And that's where you find some parents, and again now it takes me to the question of now the current fear in the country, where we are having learners having to use public transport to go far away from their homes to access schools. And we've seen the cases that we have had, which is really unfortunate, because some of the parents can also not afford to take their kids in the private schools that are near them. So they end up having their children go to the rural areas where there is actually some schools where they can access, and where perhaps they can even be able to walk, as compared to here where you take your kid to private schools and you have to think about transport, you'll have to think about food, so many things to think about. But I think it's a cause for worry that most of our learners are attending private schools. We've been discussing this for a long time in terms of how do we also ensure that we provide basic education. We provide schools within the urban informal settlements. And I think it's high time that we have a plan on this, because as it is also the urban population will continue growing. I like to give the example of looking at the areas where we live in Nairobi, and maybe 5 years or 10 years ago, the area probably was looking very good. There were no high apartments, you know, there were no structures of mabatis and all that. But what is happening now, we're seeing that every day all the spaces that we had are actually filling up. And that tells us that the population is increasing. And if we don't have measures and ways to ensure that we actually construct or provide for these learners, then there is going to be a real challenge in terms of access to education and in terms of closing the gap for the people that are accessing public education. And just one more thing, if you look at the public schools we have in Nairobi, who is attending the public schools? The people attending the public schools are actually not the poor people. It's people who can afford to take their children to private schools. So we are continuously denying the people who really deserve to attend these public schools, because of the funds that the government is providing, an opportunity to access education. And hence, for me, that becomes a real cause for worry. As much as we're saying, yes, they are filling the gap, but the government should be accountable to provide public education.
Dr. Galgalo, this 31%, I mean, if we juxtapose this with other schools across the country, it always mirrors the same situation, is it, of the private schools versus the public schools. But how is this number so relevant in the face of then growing population, the teacher-learner ratio or learners ratio, and also infrastructure that is wanting, because if you look at most of the public schools, which come to the domain of the public, especially when we are voting during the election cycles, their set is often wanting, and it clearly showcases how there's need for investment in the resetting up of the public schools infrastructure system across the country. Two major points, is it?
One, if you look at that statement, while this is commendable in complementing government efforts, that is private school. It threatens. Who threatens? It threatens what? The statement itself, I'm not getting it clear. Because if it is a private school, that threatens. I don't know. But all in all, what is very important in education system, there are 5 pillars that you need to consider about education. And I have, from time to time, I have been raising this concern. One is accessibility. Even in the speech of the cabinet secretary, he mentioned about accessibility, inclusivity, affordability, quality education, and what have you. But then the issue is, one thing we are forgetting is equity. Equity is very important than even the quality. Before you arrive at quality, the equity must be there. Accessibility, now there are 5 A's that we need to consider. One is accessibility. Before you go to any school, do we access? Do the children access this school? Then 2 is availability. Are these schools available within the proximity of these children? Are the schools available? And that is why we said the other time when this task force came up with recommendation that 17 counties should not have the universities per se. The rest of the universities who have overriding or over established should be merged. Then we don't have anything that we can merge with, even a single one. But in the University Act, it says all counties must have at least 1 university. But when the recommendation came, it's not considering that one. So are we improving on accessibility of higher learning in those ASAL counties? No. That is why the dilemma also. We are saying accessibility, and what have you. But when you are targeting and marginalizing certain region of this country where they cannot access university education, that is a deprivation of our rights to education, which is in the Constitution as such. Then we have affordability. Do we afford the education system in this country? That is why the disbursement has been delayed. Capitation has been delayed. Is it affordable that the parents can pay the school fees promptly? Is it affordable that the government can pay the remaining parts of the balance of the school fees and what have you? So where is the dilemma? So where is affordability we are talking about? The fourth one is acceptability. Acceptability. Have you accepted this system of education which is relevant to our needs and what have you? Then adaptability. What do we adapt? As education system, after we have embarked on all those 4, then we are able to adapt to this system. Now, when coming to this one where you are saying private schools, do you know that Nairobi is a city, a capital city of this country, where everybody looks for employment here, whether it is elites or not elites, casual laborers and what have you. So everybody is rushing to Nairobi to get the best outcome of our economy in this country. So that is why, and people just come up with a private school to address the quality education. The quality education.
Meaning there is an identification of a gap.
Yes, they have identified the gap. That is why now they come up to fill those gaps with their own private institution to provide quality education in this country. And everybody, even including you and I, we are rushing to a private school because it offers quality education system for our children. So we want the best for our children. And he has also said in his speech that there are shortages of staff. Staff means, to me, he was very open. He said staff in the education system, education officers and what have you, there are shortages also in the field. There are also shortage of teachers in the school implementation of the curriculum. So when there is shortage there, but the private schools are offering the best, although it is few people who are managing those. The country is managing so bulky institutions. That is why this money becomes now, to disburse them promptly becomes a problem. But as far as we are concerned, even if you go for assessment to quality education, then you will find that private schools are offering the best quality education in this country.
All right. Nyambura, coming to you, that statement, if you read between the lines by the education CS, talking about the 31% to 69%, he said this is commendable in complementing government efforts. The same sentence also mentions it threatens accessibility, inclusivity, affordability, and quality of education. The same sentence continues, this is more so when the government continues to provide capitation to all students in public schools and implement other countrywide programs that promote inclusivity of education. All the three he mentions in the statement apparently have not happened. For example, he acknowledges that this threatens accessibility of education. Capitation still hasn't hit school accounts, but the accounts made by KEPSHA, KUPPET, and other teachers' unions like the Kenya National Union of Teachers. And also, the dichotomy in this statement itself says a lot, is it, in terms of this problem appearing to be unaddressed and despite it requiring an adequate attention.
Yes, Ayub. And as you asked earlier, whether there is actually an identification of a gap, yes. And I know that there has been a lot of discussions around the issue of public and private schools in Nairobi, the utilization of it. But again, it takes us back to what actions are we taking? Are we trying to evade the issue? Because it's huge, and then we think that we're not able to solve it, and so we say, let's not address it at all. Because if you look at the amount of times we've had the conversations around the utilization of public versus private schools in Nairobi, and the action that has actually been taken to be able to sort of figure out how do we continuously provide education opportunities to all the learners in Nairobi and even many other cities. I don't think it's only Nairobi where the scenario is the same. I think most of the other cities in this country now, the trend is beginning to look like Nairobi. And that's why, for me, I think that as much as we are saying, yes, it inhibits issues of accessibility, affordability, and we are saying that the 31%, the government is already assumed that we are already providing for them fully the capitation grants that's required without any delays. But then the 69% are not benefiting from it. And this means then that for the learners that are attending private schools, that the resources they get or the resources that the schools get is just coming from the parents. And remember that also the people that are utilizing these schools perhaps are the ones in a term they will be sent home maybe for 2 or 3 times because of lack of school fees. They've not cleared their school fees. So we are also jeopardizing a lot in terms of the quality of education that's being provided, and also accessibility, because if a learner will be away from school for maybe 2 weeks, at what point do they catch up? They are unable to catch up, and I know now we are saying let's move away a lot from just thinking about the end result, but also the skills. But still, that is jeopardized in my own view, because when a learner misses these 2 weeks, the catch-up sessions also are not perhaps there, and if they are there, they are very quick. So if they were being left behind for some reason in terms of a skill, or whether it's numeracy or whichever skill it is, then it means that they will continuously be left behind. And so the idea of, yes, we are sorting one issue, we are sorting inclusivity, but is it for all the learners? It's not for all the learners. And yet we should be able to provide education for all the learners that the Basic Education Act stipulates.
And talking about accessibility and affordability, Dr. Chris Galgalo, coming to you, what then happens to the most vulnerable learners in this context who depend on public schools? You mentioned food, but also who are on the brink of drug abuse and pregnancy, who are socially the most disadvantaged. I mean, if 69% are private schools, especially in the context of Nairobi City County, what then happens if, say, that number is similar to other cities, including Mombasa, Kisumu, and Nakuru, to just but give those examples?
And actually, it is not only Nairobi. I wish the minister was able to single out. I don't know whether the minister would have singled out all the slum areas. When I was the chair of NACONEC, we were targeting urban slums, informal settlement. And when they are dealing with those ones, we are targeting those people in Mombasa slum, Eldoret slum, Kisumu slum, Nairobi slum. So we can single out all those slums, and how do we make them to access this formal education and what have you. For instance, 2003, the former late president said free primary education and in his campaign, and it rightfully came up, and it became a free primary education that improved accessibility. And it has improved a lot. So from there now, we are coming to the new system of education and what have you. So how to target these people is that the free primary education, is still there? And then the government also came up with free day secondary school.
Yeah.
So to improve access of these people, we have come up with several day schools that could improve access also. And it can also improve affordability, because not all of us are rich people or from wealthy families. So they can improve from day school to improve access. At the same time, we can still implement on that policy of free primary education and to target them.
Thank you.
Thirdly, what you have not known, there is these bursaries which are being provided by NGCDF.
Yes.
At the same time, there is also another bursary from the counties. At the same time, we also have from Ministry of Education, which is called Elimu Scholarship. And also we have different institution or organization like the banks are also chipping in to assist these vulnerable people as per se.
Thank you.
So I think this can help us to penetrate, also to ventilate also through education system for vulnerable children.
Thank you. So let's now take a look at the feedback and the engagement we had with our viewers who are watching this broadcast. The hashtag on X is Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya, and at Ayub Abdikadir. Here is what you are saying on the hashtag X, and the first one coming from Gode Barasawere, and he says that it's so evident that President William Ruto is committed to transforming this nation in all aspects. However, the elephant in the room is that he hired a bunch of people with zero commitment and push to help him deliver. That's the sad truth. And the next one is from Gabi Wakasiaka. He says, schools... Yes, Wakasiaka, yeah, right. Schools have no capitation money even after being reduced from 22,000 to 17,000. Parents should prepare to meet the deficit. The competency-based curriculum education system is also in chaos. Meanwhile, the government keeps launching and relaunching same projects. Sir Nixon Dugure says whoever is responsible for school capitation fees should know early enough that the delay in to do so usually have a ripple out effect on the education system, mainly the failure of learners, as well as too much stress on parents or guardians. The next one is from Hino Lilian Sio. She says it might take a little longer for things to perfectly work out, but it's a sure deal that President William Ruto has planned for the absolute development of that's meticulously championed from every state department. As a country, we will triumph. Next, Engineer Lazaro says education sector facing unaccountable number of challenges ranging from natural calamities to man-made ones, i.e. floods, banditry, activities and intentional delays of releasing the funds. Next, this comes from Ben Hakim, says the education sector is in crisis. It's not just about the disbursement, Capturing biodata for Form 1 under the NEMIS, he says, system is a nightmare, that servers are jammed and then they use the same data for disbursement. Seems it's a strategy to reduce the number for disbursement. Next is from Bob Otiono when it says late disbursement of funds is really hurting the learning calendar, which has let almost all schools close early, and the government must work on this to avoid poor quality of education. And Peter Gesura, 89, says the Ministry of Education should release the capitation to schools in good time to enable programs to run. The extra charges by many schools is due to the fact that the Ministry of Education does not release enough money and in good time. Okelo Mwalimu says even though it's true that some schools charge extra levies, principals can't be entirely blamed. How do we expect them to operate without timely disbursement of capitation? The same parents who complain the most do not attend the annual general meetings where crucial decisions are made. And Babu Michel K says, I saw CS Mashogo announce that education capitation amounting to billions have been disbursed to schools, and this was the last week of the first term. So do the ministry disburse these funds, minding the time they just disburse them anytime? And the next one from Daniel Sindani, 78, he says that there are accountability mechanisms in place, but corruption is the problem. Board of Managements, County Education and the Teacher Service Commission directors and auditors are compromised. Monitoring and evaluation is in favor of the principal and not accountability. Next one from Esawe, he says it's disheartening that in this day and age, education isn't given a priority it deserves. Instead of adequately funding schools to combat illiteracy, governments often prioritize luxuries and leaders prioritize personal gain over education advancement. Well, there's also some that are coming on the short SMS code. This is from Beatrice Alachi, the lawmaker representing Dagoretti North constituency, kindly advised and abet schools must have at least 200 children and above, not 50 in the whole school, and they must take care of children and ensure they pass. People attending public schools in Dagoretti are very poor parents who are trying. We need affordable school uniforms. It is possible for the government to take over some of these schools, just like before the government used to adopt community schools. Your final comments, Dr. Chris and Nyambura Thiongo, starting with Nyambura.
Thank you, Ayub. My final comments are going to be around issues of evidence. I think it's important, and we've continuously, as Rally Africa Kenya members and across, try to provide the evidence of what is happening, especially across the country. And I think just to tie that piece is around ensuring that we have evidence-based advocacy, that at least we are able to see what is happening and we're able to provide exactly what is happening in terms of the evidence, because we can't engage without the evidence of exactly what is happening. Yeah. And just to tie that also is to talk about partnerships and what role partnerships can play to ensure that some of these challenges that we are facing in our education sector is addressed. And finally, for me, is the power of the community. Yes. I think that the community has a lot of power. As we said, we are always the ones that people come to when they want to get the votes. So why aren't we also taking it back to them and saying, we need you to fix the education system? Thank you, Ayub.
Yes, Dr. Galgalo.
Mine is about the school funds. All those people who contribute to the education system must be put into one basket and audited for transparency and accountability purpose. Ministry of Education should play their part. Other stakeholders or well-wishers should put in the same basket as they did during free primary education, when Kibaki came up with the one basket where everybody puts into that basket, and then that money is disbursed to all the schools for the purpose of quality education and efficiency in those schools. Mm-hmm. Secondly, what I wanted is the Ministry of Education should go out of their comfort zone to the field and assess the challenges CBC is facing on the ground. Okay. I don't want them to just say CBC is very good without even having an assessment and mode of assessment. There is a crisis in the field as concerned the CBC.
Okay.
I have visited those several schools and I have encountered several challenges, and the Ministry of Education with its human resource persons, the personnel, they should go to the field and see from Turkana to Lamu, from Mandera to Siaya, and they should go and assess the facts on the ground.
Thank you,
Not
Dr.
just to put it in the press and they said everything is okay.
Thank you,
well,
Dr.
none is okay.
Much appreciated for your time here on the broadcast, and the general consensus here is that education is largely meant, and the reason as to why we're having this discussion, for poverty reduction in our country, human development, job prospects for individuals, and broader socio-economic development. I appreciate your time. Nyambura Thiongo is the Regional Education Learning Initiative that is Rally Africa Kenya Country Coordinator. Your time is appreciated. Many thanks for coming on board, and as well to that of Dr. Chris Galgalo, who is an educationist, and thank you for your time as well here, Dr. And thanks to you too for watching the broadcast and keeping your comments coming here on the broadcast. Up next on Daybreak is autism awareness on health and lifestyle. After the break, stay tuned.